Hello and welcome to CCM Discovery. I am Roger St. James and I get to be your host. And I'm glad that you're here. Now, this is a place where we slow down a little bit and we talk about the stories behind the scenes, behind the music that shapes our faith. Now, nothing here is rushed, nothing is polished to perfection, just an honest conversation about creativity, callings, and the way God shows up in the middle of real life. Now, in each episode, I get to sit down with some amazing artists, worship leaders, authors, and the folks behind the scenes who are figuring things out just like the rest of us. Now, we talk about what inspires them, what challenges them, and how their walk with Christ shapes the songs and words that they get to share with us and the world. Now, my hope is that as you listen, you'll hear something that perhaps encourages you or gives you a fresh way to think about your own journey. Now, so settle in, take a breath, and let's explore this together. This is CCM Discovery, and I'm Roger St. James.
My aunt is getting old. She's really up there. She was with us over the holidays. She's in her mid-90s. I know. Her doctor told her if she wants to keep her mind sharp, she should work on games and puzzles. And I sat with her for 2 hours while she struggled to solve a maze. I didn't have heart to tell her it was a QR code.
Now, that man telling the story about how his confused aunt is our guest tonight. Comedian, musical parodist, teacher, Christian Dan McGowen. Good afternoon, Dan.
Hello, how are you, Roger?
I am good, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Did your aunt ever figure out what the situation was there?
You know, she's still sitting in the back of a trailer somewhere trying to figure it out. I have no idea. She's buying a lot of stuff, so that's good. Just keep clicking on that code.
Yep, buying. Amazon loves her right now.
Yes, right.
Well, thank you for taking the time to join us. And as you heard from the intro, what we like to do here is we just like to introduce folks and reintroduce folks to people like yourself who are out there trying to make a difference in the positive. Yeah. And so I'll let you give I have your resume here, but why don't you tell me what you think about Dan McGowen?
He's a really nice guy. It's funny because I actually for many years worked in churches as a music and worship director. And I've also written quite a few songs that are out there for praise songs and choral music and children's music. So I'm very well acquainted with the whole CCM world. And about 5 years ago, that whole era of my life ended, and I had been doing comedy all along, but I dove full steam ahead into comedy. So now I perform comedy, clean comedy, and I have a passion to, raise the atmosphere of the room to be one of joy. And oftentimes that works. If they don't laugh, it doesn't work, but that's okay. I keep doing it. That's part of what comes with this crazy thing called comedy. And I've been a part of the Christian Comedy Association, and I've done a dry bar and all sorts of things. So, what I do these days is I perform in churches. I do corporate events. I've done a few cruise ships, and I'm doing a lot of teaching, and I'm also coaching folks that want to, get better at this craft of comedy.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that. I think that's an amazing thing because so many in the Christian world, I mean, it's a difficult thing. We've talked to other comics on here, and I'm very impressed with what you guys do. I mean, because you have to do it at a level that is probably not what most people expect when they hear a comedian. You're out there, and what people expect. That's what I want to touch base with you about is how you deal with what people expect from you when you hear the words clean comedian.
Yeah, I love that question because one of the things I teach new students is we have to reach a place where we find out what the audience will expect and what they will accept. You look at this face, this kind of cherub. I can't believe how big my head is on the screen here. That's great. Here, let me move back a little bit. But anyway, this face is not the guy who's going to come out and cuss like a sailor. That's just not who I am. And if I did, people might wonder about that,
Yeah.
But so I've always gravitated towards working clean, leaning clean with my comedy, because I grew up in an era where people had to work clean on television or other venues, not in clubs, but when we saw them, they had to learn how to work clean. And because of that, they had to learn how to write creatively. So I love that I go into clubs and theaters and settings that are not necessarily a Christian setting, but I come in and I do what I do, which is work clean. And when you get them laughing, I feel really good about that.
Well, I did notice that on it was yesterday or today at you gave away the comedy secret on your
Yes, that's
Facebook
right.
page.
Yeah, I wrote that today. Here's the comedy secret nobody will tell you: make them laugh. I There's a lot of people. I guess it's always been this way, but we live in an age now where anybody can put together a reel and throw it up on Facebook or whatever, Instagram. And you know, comedy is one of those things where people feel they need to have their freedom of speech, and get their voice out there, and that's all great. And I believe in freedom of speech, but if you're going to say you do stand-up comedy, you got to be funny. There are people that get up and basically, a phrase I use all the time, they're giving a TED talk. They're not really performing stand-up comedy. So if you have an opinion, that's great, but just bend it so it's funny, because if people paid money to come to a comedy show, they want to laugh, is my opinion.
Yeah, and that's what I like about, like I said, I've been diving deep into everything you're doing, and one of the strangely wonderful things about doing this type of show is I get to technically stalk people, and
Yeah, that's
and
good. Yeah,
and diving in, I see you've really done so much. I mean, you've won the Branson Comedy Festival.
right.
You're a member of the Heavyweights of Clean Comedy.
Anyway, it's a
Yeah,
clean comedy. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. What can you give me a little more details on what that was all about?
Yeah, there were four of us who were big boned, and we got together to do a couple of shows actually, and we made a DVD. And this was a long time ago, so it's out of print now. But it was great to meet these guys and go to these shows and make a DVD, and it did okay. It didn't have anywhere near the same impact that like a dry bar would have, a comedy special. And I guess I'm assuming viewers know what dry bar comedy is, but they may not.
Yeah,
Dry bar
I wanted to,
comedy.
why don't you just lead right into that because you've done a dry bar. So
Yeah, I mean, it's worth checking out because it's drybarcomedy.com, and everybody who performs, it's on the web, so it's not like on a regular channel like a broadcast network. It's on the web, but every performer on there performs clean, and there have been some folks that are not necessarily clean comedians normally, but they have crafted a clean set to fit within the parameters of dry bar comedy. So I had a great experience with them. It was wonderful. We did two shows back to back, and then they pull the best from each and put together a special for you. So yeah,
yeah, it was great. I've watched it, and you've also been on True TV. You had a
that's
show on
right.
True TV.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah, yeah, it's funny.
Hey,
You do things and you kind of forget what's out there. And I've done Google searches on myself, and I'll think, oh, that's right, I did that. So yeah.
so let's backtrack a little bit because you are a Christian and you're a comedian, but how did your walk of faith start?
Wow. Well, I was very young. I came from a pretty dysfunctional home. My parents were nightclub entertainers. My dad was a piano player and singer, and my mom was a drummer and singer. And they were really amazing, talented people, but they lived that nightclub kind of life. And so the home I grew up in was pretty chaotic. And when I was 12, a friend of mine invited me to a Christian camp in Southern California called Forest Home. And I had been a part of this church going with him for about the year before that. And I went to that camp, and at 12 years old, it was the first time I heard about, really unconditional love and the gospel and all that. I talk about this in my act, and this is true. When my mom took me to the bus before I got on, she said, "Now don't let them brainwash you." And even back then, I was kind of a smart aleck, and I said, "I think my brain needs some washing." So I went to camp, and by the end of the week, I became a Christian. And I've never had a problem since. So it's that's a joke. But yeah, so my journey, I'd say up until I was about 22, I was fine. I didn't do any kind of crazy rebellious stuff. I was very active in the church that I was in, doing everything musical and acting and all that. And when I was 22, I became aware at a much deeper level of the power and the presence of the Holy Spirit, which I had not really only tapped into in this Presbyterian church I was in. So that totally altered me. And I remember one morning I was leading worship at the piano, and I was a very big fan and influenced by Keith Green. Some people will remember who he was.
Oh yeah.
And so I decided to do a bunch of Keith Green songs and really show off. So I started playing and singing, and the first song was fine. But in the second song, I was about 2 or 3 measures in, and I hit some chord that doesn't exist in nature, and it was terrible, and I was sweating, and people were laughing. And I didn't hear an audible voice, but it was like God took a 2x4 and went, bam, and he went, psst, Dan, it's not about you. It's about me. And from that moment forward, everything I did musically, as far as I can tell, was always aimed and directed towards him as the focus of our worship. So I've tried to bring that into my comedy as well. And I don't go up and say I'm a Christian comedian, but when I have done corporate shows, there's been a few times where people are leaving and some people are lingering, and it'll get down to maybe 2, 3, 4 people, and somebody will come up to me and say, hey, can I ask you a question? They're kind of nervous. Do you happen to be a believer? I say, yeah. And we'll talk about that very briefly, and then we'll pray. That's maybe happened a half dozen times in all the years I've done this. But I don't know. I really value that even happens at all.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've really noticed about the artists that I've talked to on this show, is that's what keeps them going. It's you go and like I said, I've watched your show, I've watched your dry bar, and I've watched your various things on YouTube, and you never outwardly say, I'm here because of God, but your positivity and your joy comes through. And a lot of the artists say the
I've
same
actually
thing.
tried to, for the past couple of years, I've been trying to figure out how can I take this to more of a ministry level. And so, like, I do a joke. I say, hey, I like telling people I'm a Christian. And sometimes there's some applause. I say, I'm not, but I like telling people I am. It's like a joke. And then from there, I say, I kind of say what I just did about going to that camp. And it's a way to then I go into, sometimes I forget that I'm a Christian, like when I'm driving, and I do a little joke about that. So I'm trying to make it real that, yeah, I believe in God, and I call myself a Christian, and I'm a human being who sometimes messes up, but we're saved by grace, So I would say that's like 5% of what I do on stage. And it's not all the time. It just kind of depends on the venue and, what are the other comics doing,
And like what we all talk about, it's what, if you've touched one person, you've touched one person, and that's really what we're all about.
Yeah, over the past couple of years, so we live in Redding, California, and like a lot of towns, there's a huge homeless population here in town. All right, the right way to say it today is unhoused. They're unhoused people. Yeah. And I would drive around, and I would my heart would go out to them, because I'd think, how could I could give them some money or maybe stop and pray with them or whatever, but is there anything else I can do as a comedian? Can I use these talents that God's given me in a tangible way, And about a year ago now, it just popped into my head, this idea of an event called Comedy Cares. Comedy Cares. And there's a website, comedy-cares.com. And basically we did a show where I invited about 7 comedians. We all worked clean, and they all worked for free, the comedians. And then throughout the evening, I brought up 5 guests from different organizations here in town who, specifically work with the unhoused. And they just gave a real brief, 2 to 3 minutes. Here's who we are. Here's what we do. If you want to get involved, here's how to contact us. So I had it was a free event. You just had to bring items, that could be handed out to the unhoused. And I had no idea what was going to happen. I chose a theater that seats about 120 people. And I thought, well, we'll see who shows up.
Yeah.
And within probably 5 minutes before showtime, the place was packed, all full, all the way.
Oh, wow.
Which blessed me, shocked me, surprised me, all of that. I had no idea. And obviously, I think God was working in that. But I also think the idea of having this cause that we were all gathering around, that audience members who shared that passion came, and it was probably one of the best shows I've been a part of in Reading so far. We've been here for almost 5 years, and it's probably one of the best shows I've been a part of. Every comic did well, the people who spoke did well, and the audience was fantastic. They were loving it. So I don't know yet exactly what the aftermath of that is, but the groups that came, they received a lot of donations from people, canned goods and what have you, clothing and so forth.
So is that something that's going to continue, the Comedy Cares?
I think so. I mean, I'd like to try it in other cities, like we live near Chico, we live near Oroville, we live near Red Bluff. There's towns around here that have that same issue, and I'd love to find either comedians from Reading or from those other areas to work on something like that. And who knows, maybe we could get into a bigger theater. There's a theater in town that probably seats, 500 or 600. I'd love to get something in there, but we'll see what God does.
Oh, yeah, and definitely let us know if we can do anything with that, because through this show we've met several people, not just comedians, but musical artists who live in California, who might be willing to help.
Yeah, I've thought of doing kind of a variety thing too. It doesn't have to be comedy. It can be. There's a couple of guys in town that are pretty good, like Christian magicians, and then there's Christian singers here in town. And I'd love to pull something together with other artists, to be a part of something like this. So, it's relatively new, and I don't want to put the cart before the horse yet, but that idea doesn't leave me. I mean, I love getting up and performing and making people laugh, and I love when I get those gigs. I love producing shows here in town that are clean, family friendly. But I feel like what sort of pulls me is Comedy Cares, at least for now.
Well, that's fantastic. I didn't know about that, but I'm definitely going to look into it, and I'm going to, we'll reach out and we'll see what we can do, because that sounds like something that changes lives, and that's the important thing that we're here to do, without beating people in the head about it.
Well, and that's what I like about the comedy that I do, and I'm helping other comedians in town. When I teach the class, I never say this is a clean comedy class. And if they want to develop material that's not clean, then they can do that. I'm not going to tell them not to, but I've tried to show them what I've learned, which is years ago when I decided to go clean with my comedy, that opened the door to corporate events, cruise ships, community shows, things where they pay you money. And so a comedian can certainly choose to be vile and vulgar and all that and tell their jokes in bars. If they want to do that, that's fine. That's up to them. But if they ever want to expand and reach more people, I think it's wise to learn just how to craft material that is still funny, but clever. It's just written clever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. So do you think it's harder to be a quote unquote clean comedian than the vulgar?
Well, yeah, I do, but maybe not the way you're asking. So I look at things like excessive cussing, vulgarity, all that kind of stuff. I look at that as low-hanging fruit. If you're in a comedy club and everybody's sitting right next to each other and they're all, kicking back drinks or whatever, they're already loose. And you get up and you start telling a joke that basically it's one F-bomb after another. It's not really a joke. It's just people are laughing because you're using this language that is almost like we're in junior high trying to out-cuss each other behind the gym, So people will laugh at that but not because it's funny. They laugh at that because it's naughty. I get to be naughty, and that guy up there is being naughty for me, and I can jump in with it. There are comics who are very good. They write great material, and they also are salty with their language. So I'm not trying to discount them. But my MO is, can we write something that is so cleverly written, which is hard. I mean, it's hard to write comedy, but write something that's so cleverly written that people get it. I do a joke about, so I went to the doctor and it turns out I have a skin condition, too much. So, yeah. So that's the way of telling me, I say I'm fat, but I don't say fat. So he asked what I was doing for exercise, and I told him I like to play golf. So he suggested I try walking the course. And so I did that, and I was actually surprised at all the things I had missed having not walked the course before. They've got windmills, castles, clown heads, all sorts of things. So it's a way to find a twist on a joke where people are thinking, oh, golf, it's another joke about golf. But obviously it's about mini golf, Anyway, so I think it's important for comedians to, if you want to reach more people, widen your ability to reach them, and don't narrow what you do to just being excessively vulgar. Like I say, you'll end up getting some gigs maybe, or tips. And if you're okay with that, great. But I don't know. I kind of like the idea of earning a little bit of money when I'm doing what God's made me able to do, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, and I think what's interesting is the way you're describing it is, as somebody who doesn't write comedy, the fact that you actually have to write it. I think that's an interesting, because when I'm watching you perform, I'm just thinking, oh, he's a funny guy, but you don't think of the writing behind it.
Well, most people don't think about the writing behind it. If we're good at what we're doing, most people think what you just do. Oh, Dan just got up and off the top of his head, he said some funny stuff. But that certainly happens sometimes. But I would say 90% of the time, I and other comedians, whether they're clean or not, have actually crafted. They've sat down and they thought, I want to do a joke about whatever. And they begin crafting that joke. Excuse me. And it might take, it can take months to get a joke to where you really, really like it. Months of writing, and then months of testing it and seeing and filming yourself. Taping. I'm from the 1930s. Taping, but
okay.
Filming yourself.
I still say albums, Dan. It's okay.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, right. Yeah, I got some cassette tapes back there. We can listen to later. So it is. You do spend time doing that, and then you try to hone in on. Let's say you're doing a 10-minute set somewhere. What's my best 10 minutes? And it might take you a year to really land on a solid 10 minutes of material that almost always works, And again, that's because of the writing. I tell new comedians, you got to write every day. Write every day. Some of it might be garbage, but you got to write every day. And then, let the cream rise to the top.
Yeah, and so you teach, but you also coach.
I do.
What's the difference between the two?
Well, coaching is more individual, one-on-one. I work with, and did I lose you? Are you there?
We're back. Yep.
Okay, great. I coaching is just one-on-one. So you're a comedian, you want to get better at your craft. We'll meet and we'll talk about what goals do you have, where do you struggle, in your writing, what's hard for you in that, and we just work together on helping you get past whatever the limitations are you put on yourself. Teaching is much more of a class, several students, and you're kind of teaching the basics or whatever, and that's not really a one-on-one.
And so, but as far as writing, you've also written what, 1, 2, 3, 4 books, I think I'm looking at right now.
I have written some books. I've written my original passions of the books that I wrote were on music in the Christian church and some of my views on that, and how I think we've kind of missed the boat in some areas, and is what we're doing okay? Has it become too big of an industry, and blah, blah, blah. But I've also written a couple of humor books, and they're all self published, and they don't really sell. But I mean, it's more of a cathartic, get it out of my system kind of a thing.
Oh, and now we're going to have to dive into that. I think you're talking about "Rockin' a Hard Place." Was your
Oh, well, that
about the
was
music?
how'd you get on that? Yeah, that was actually a script that a really funny guy, a comedian out of, wow, where is he? Is he in Indiana or Idaho? Anyway, his name is Darren Marlar, and very funny guy. And he now does a podcast called Weird Darkness, which is it's kind of like mystery stories and that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
he and I got together and we wrote a script for a TV show idea that he had called "Rock in a Hard Place." And it was about a pastor and their church. The church gets destroyed through a flood. They have no place to meet, and so the pastor ends up meeting at the bar across the street from the church. And the church is all, we can't meet at a bar. So it was trying to show the world and the church coming together and loving one another and all that. And that was kind of Darren's baby, and I just helped write it, But it was a good script.
I like definitely the theme of that when I was reading through that, but I also really like your. I could dive into your thoughts a little bit on how you think music and the church are working together or not working so well together.
Yeah, I I came of my Christian age. So 1969, I was 12. So I'll let everybody do the math on that. And that's when that's when the Jesus movement was coming in. So in my early high school years, I was very involved. I'm from Southern California, very involved in going down to the Calvary Chapel tent revivals, and very early, before they were anybody, Mustard Seed Faith, Amy Grant, Second Chapter of Acts, all these folks that
Larry Norman, Randy Stonehill.
Larry Norman, Randy Stonehill, yeah. And so I was immersed in that. And what I loved about it, that obviously it was music that was speaking to my generation, that was different than the hymns that we sang in my church. It wasn't necessarily better, but it was I could relate to it. So I related to the early, what became CCM. I related to all that Christian rock music, and my personal feeling is that leaving the 70s into the 80s, we then moved into kind of the superstar Christians, Russ Taff, Amy Grant, Stephen Taylor, and I mean, and groups and bands and Petra and all. And it kind of turned into this industry where it was, in my opinion, much more about performance, where in the early days, it was in my opinion, much more about relationship with those first bands, and I felt that the reason for that relationship part was people in my age group wanting to, move away from the performance of big church choirs and watching people perform and even singing the hymns in kind of a performance manner. That was more. But then we now call music.
Yeah. We're back. Yep. This is the wonderful things about recording. Eric will make that perfect. I can see
you. Not sure. Can always fix this in the edit.
Oh yeah, that's why Eric is one of my heroes.
If we're on or not.
You're bouncing back and forth, but I see you now.
So yeah, I do that. It's a problem that we worship now. Let's have worship music.
Mm-hmm.
to we all read. I wish it was the way it is, but it is. So you live with it.
Yeah, I've lost you again, Dan.
Oh, go out and come back in. Okay, how do I do that? Do I need to do that? Go out and leave
Yeah,
back in? Can you hear me?
let's. I can hear you now. Let's try that, and then we'll reset the question.
Yeah, just go ahead out, and we'll just keep it rolling. I'll edit.
That's a bummer. He was on a good roll.
Yeah,
He was
he's
on a good
on, but
roll.
he's not on.
Okay.
All right, he's off now.
It's that California. They're conspiring against us, Eric. It's California. It's that darn Gavin Newsom. I blame him.
Yeah, yeah. He's close to the devil anyway. There he is.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Am I back?
Let me get you.
I see you.
Good. Can you hear
I
me?
blame. Yep, I blame Gavin Newsom. Hey, I blame Gavin Newsom.
Good.
So I figure, just so because what you were saying was amazing, I'll just rephrase it as and ask the question. So Dan, tell me how you think modern music and the church are either working together or not working together. If that works for you. Okay.
Yeah, you're about to ask me that?
Yep.
Or you just asked me that?
I'm going to ask you that in like 3, 2.
Got it. Okay. Got it.
All right, Dan, you were talking about how you have concerns or questions about how Christian music and the church work together.
Yeah, I do. I'm not sure how far back I have to go, but I grew up in the Jesus movement, and there was a time when the hippie music came in, and I could relate to that because it was relational and it was different than the used to. By watching choirs with everybody doing the thing, 4 parts, but it spoke to me. The music that we were doing in the early Jesus movement really spoke to me. And then within about 10 years, we started moving into worship becoming more of an industry with bands and concerts and promoters and all of that. And I think we're at a place today where, churches go out online and look at different worship sets and they want to replicate that in their church so that they have good worship, meaning good music. And I feel bad that we're missing other parts of worship, which are the word being preached, fellowship, prayer, and all that. I wish that worship was not limited just to music, because you turn on the Christian stations and that's what you hear is now we're going to worship, and it's good music, but there's more to worship. So I wish that we didn't label it like that, but maybe it's just how it's going to be and we deal with it and move on.
Well, I really am touched by what you're saying, because I was on the air back in the 80s and the 90s, back in what they call the golden age of Christian music.
Right.
And I got, when it started going corporate and all the radio stations were being bought up and not local mom and pops anymore, the station I was at got bought and I had no place to go. And I didn't like, I was offered a few jobs, but I didn't like the way things were going. So I got out of the industry for about 25 years, 30 years. And that's how this show got started. I was walking around the house. I was walking around the house cleaning one day, and I said, let me turn on the local conglomerate. And I have been advised by several people not to mention any names, the local conglomerate radio station. And I was listening to a song, and I said, that's a pretty good song. And people who listen to the show have heard this story before. But I said, that's a pretty good song, but it's long. And I remember, 3.5, 4 minutes is what we're looking for. So I went online, the old radio guy in me kicked in, and I realized that I had listened to 3 songs and I thought it was all the same song.
Right.
And that clicked something in my brain, because I remember back in the 80s and 90s, you could tell within 5, 6 bars of the song, oh, that's Russ Taff, that's Amy Grant, that's Michael W. Smith, that's Two Hearts, that's David Meese. And that wasn't there. So it just got into my head. He said, but there's got to be out there. So I went to my, at the time, 21-year-old son and said, hey, Tyler, can you show me how to use the internet? And he got me on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. And I started looking for new artists. And that's what started this show.
That's cool.
I was looking for artists who didn't have labels and who were just doing it because it's what they were led to do and what they wanted to do. Right. And that's who we've been talking to for 3 seasons now. And to speak to what you're saying, is one of the bands that really got me started was a sister duo called the band Jaren. And while I was interviewing them, and they have since been signed and they're doing extremely well, and they're 2 sisters who really got it together. I encourage you to check out their music. Jaren said, Roger, I hope this doesn't go too long, because, I have to go down with my church and we're going into Nashville tonight to minister to people.
Wow.
And I said, and this is a band that's actually is successful. They're touring.
Yes.
And they're hanging on to that.
Yeah.
And that's what I think there's hope. So that there's a lot.
Yeah, no, that's a great story, because, it's, whenever I wrote music that got published for choral music or kids music or some praise stuff, my heart was always, I'm not trying to show off that I can write songs. I'm glad that God gave me that ability, but I want people to encounter his presence. I want to write songs that hopefully are in line with Scripture, that churches could sing in their congregations and join in with the participation of worshiping God, as opposed to just standing and watching a band do a song great, perform what's on the radio, And I'm sure there are churches that still do that, but I just think that that's kind of a lost art at the moment. Who knows? It might come back. If maybe people will begin to miss that also, and worship leaders in churches or band members in churches will begin to say, you know what, we got to get back to that nuts and bolts, or more simple songs that speak to the glory of God and the praise of Jesus. Obviously in comedy I don't do that, but hopefully Who I Am comes through, and when I meet people and talk to them, other comics, hopefully that comes through. And you never know. I've had a couple of comics in town who are pretty raunchy, but they want to be on some of the clean shows that I produce. And I say, well, it's got to be clean. And they're looking at it as a challenge. Okay, can I write 5 to 7 minutes that's free of all the vulgarity? And, can I do that? And I say, I think you can. So I kind of look at that as a little bit of a spiritual feather in my cap of I'm helping these people realize there's more than just this color in the crayon box. There's other ways to approach this.
And that's exactly what you're doing. And we have to remember that, we're not all going to be the type of people that when they hear us speak, they come to God. A lot of times we have to be the example just by being, like you said, you're a good man, a clean comic. You put it out there without Bible thumping. And
Right.
and a lot of people will actually take more to that because they say, oh, he's just a good guy, and like
And
you
we have
said,
to
people come
use
up to
the
you.
gifts that God's given us, which
Mhm.
I think a lot of people try to do that. But, I'm not an evangelist. I can talk to people and, have a great conversation with them. But I would not, even though I've done it a few times, I would not call myself a preacher necessarily. But when I perform in churches, my comedy, I almost every time I add in a kind of a testimony element because you kind of have to, and it's like this is going to validate that I'm a Christian guy. Let me give you my testimony, and that's fine. People relate to that, and they can find out more of the dirt about me and how who I am, and I value that. I value that we can do that. That we can talk to people and share. The word testimony is so grand, but just share our lives with people. And like you said a minute ago, you never know. Somebody might hear that and go, wow, yeah, I should change this aspect of my life,
Or there's something I see in Dan that I wish I had. And
Yeah,
how does he
that's a
get that?
really cool comment there. When I was in LA, I would call into a radio station. I was in radio for a little while in Denver, but anyway, but before all that, I was in LA, and there was on K Earth 101 was a great station, an oldie station, and I would call in and have little bits with the guy who was the morning DJ. And it just worked out that he had me come in one time, to the studio. And we did some stuff in the studio, and that led to him and I becoming buddies. He's a Jewish guy, doesn't call Jesus his Lord, which is fine. But we got to know each other. And one time he said, "You ever want to go to dinner?" And I thought, sure, I'll go to dinner. So I went to his house, and as we're there, he said, "I got to ask you something." I said, "What?" And he said, what is it about you? So, and I thought in my heart, well, let me tell you about me. I believe in Jesus. He's my Lord and Savior. And he didn't come to Christ, but I mean, he honored that. And we're still friends today. So, and we're very different, we're on different ends of the religious spectrum, let's say, but, so yeah, you never know how you're going to come off and how people will read that and want to explore it.
And that's what I think we're here to do. Yeah, I think we're
Yeah.
just here to live by example. And I will be perfectly honest, my example is not always anywhere near good, but I think that's
Well,
also
that's
part of
because
it.
you're a human being. And
Oh no, don't call me that, Dan.
no, you are. We human beings have a way of messing things up.
But you do musical parodies,
I do. I haven't
and
done it for probably the last 6 months or so, but that was a huge chunk of what I did. And I would take songs that people knew along the lines of a Weird Al, or for people that are older, Alan Sherman, or
yeah,
people like that. And I always have loved that. I've done some of those in churches. I did a song to Eleanor Rigby about all the lonely people, but in my version, it was talking about all the back row people, the people who go to the church just sit in the back row. So,
yep.
and I love doing that. It's fun. And it's just one more thing to add to your set, and it eats up time, which is great. 2 to 3 minutes you're singing instead of trying to come up with jokes. But I do, when I have a long show, I still end with a riff I do on A Horse with No Name, if you remember that song.
Oh yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
And it's not a parody. It's more of me picking the song apart. Like, what are they saying? What's going on here? And it usually works well. I mean, I would say of the hundreds of times I've done that song, audiences like it, and it's a great closer for a show. Leaves everybody happy and clapping and all that, you know. So yeah,
And as long as you're clapping at the end, I guess that's
right.
what you're shooting for.
Yeah, you don't want them throwing cabbages. That's a terrible way to end a show. Yeah.
Well, Dan, I have to thank you so much for spending some time with us. It's been fascinating. I always get excited right before a show because I have my little list of notes, but the stuff that
Yeah.
comes out during, like our theme here is, it's the art that brings us together, the stories that make us friends, and God that makes us family.
Oh, I like that.
And I just love having these conversations, and I thank you for that.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to flash any contact info, but the two websites I would love people to know about are my comedy website, which is danmcgowen.com. So
Yep.
you have my name spelled correctly there. Yes. danmcgowen.com is my comedy website. And then for the unhoused program thing I'm doing, that's comedy-cares.com. comedy-cares.com. So
Yeah, we will definitely add that one, and we've been running your other social media under as we've been chatting. But
oh, great. Okay, cool.
Yep, there it is right now.
There it is.
And
Except he spelled it wrong. It's A-N, not E-N.
oh,
A-N.
we will fix that. We will
Dan
fix
McGowan.
that. We will make sure that gets taken care of. It's California, man. When he comes back, we'll just wrap up with Matthew's 9 seconds and then go.
All right, here we are. He's cutting in and out.
I do like the goatee though. Looks good on you, Eric.
There he is. Let's see where we're at. You on?
I have to do that.
Yeah, the goatee. I like the goatee. All right,
I
Dan.
don't know.
We'll fix those spelling errors.
This is all about a you. Yeah. Good.
I like it though. It looks good. So we're just gonna we'll come back and we'll wrap up and we'll be good to go if that works for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Totally.
Okay. So here we go. All right, Dan. Thank you. It's like I said, it's been really cool talking with you and getting to know you better. And we have kind of a tradition here as we wrap up before we go into the last bit. I have two boys. My oldest son Tyler is a legitimate hero. He's a firefighter. He is the one who got me onto the internet. Yeah, he's a great guy. And my youngest son Matthew is profoundly autistic. And for some reason, 9 seconds matters to Matthew. So when we're wrapping up here, we ask our guests to give us like 9-ish seconds of wisdom if you wanted to throw something out there to the world in 9-ish seconds.
Be authentic, because people can, you know how dogs can smell fear. People can smell if you're not being authentic or not. So just be authentic. You know, I think
that is perfect because Matthew is very, very good at knowing when somebody's trying to BS him or actually try to be helpful to him. So that works perfect for Matthew. Dan, thank you so much. It's been an honor. We are definitely going to talk more about you, and especially your what you're doing with the unhoused of California, and we'll see what we can do about that. And we're going to go out on one of your favorite bits that you sent us. And Dan, thank you. It's been a great pleasure getting to know you, and I look forward to staying in contact.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. This is great.
Oh, marriage is great. We do love movies. We love movies and TV. It's so different now, though, than when I was a kid. When I was a kid, we had like 9 channels, and very limited viewing opportunities, right? But we did have the TV Guide, which is great, because the TV Guide came every week to our house. And this was my dad's favorite magazine. But he would plop down in his easy chair with his pen, and he'd go through the TV Guide, and using a system that he developed, he would go through and mark all the shows in order of preference of what we were going to watch. And because he was the king of the TV, we watched what he wanted to watch, right? Nowadays, TV is totally different, right? Because we have like 900 channels and virtually unlimited viewing opportunities, right? And it's crazy. And now you don't even need the TV Guide because they print it right on the TV monitor. The description is right there. But here's my problem. I can't read it. The type is too tiny. I don't know what it says, And we have a 60-inch TV with, we sit about 10 feet from it. I still don't know what it says. I actually keep a pair of hunter binoculars next to the couch that I use so I can read the monitor. Harrison Ford stars in a riveting drama about a computer, ... More. Harrison Ford stars in a riveting drama about a computer virus, period. That's it, one word? You couldn't squeeze it onto the... Now, we like watching episodic shows, and there's one we saw not too long ago, maybe you saw it, called Severance. And it was pretty good. We watched about 2 or 3 episodes, and we decided to go to bed. A few nights later, we came back to watch it again, but we couldn't remember the name of the show, and we couldn't remember what streaming channel it was on, right? So we knew that Christopher Walken was in it, so we had to do a search. Okay, let's see. Blast from the Past, no. Deer Hunter, no. Annie Hall, no. There it is, Severance, and we finally got it. Watched about 4 or 5 episodes. It was a lot of fun. And to make sure we don't have this problem in the future, my wife went out and she purchased a dry erase board that she mounted on the wall next to the TV monitor. And now she just writes the name of the show and writes what streaming channel it's on. So basically, it's like we have TV Guide again, right?